final piece of the puzzle is competitiveness. And that's what Rich States, Poor States is about, is you have to keep your taxes reasonable because in the United States we have this thing called freedom of association. We have the ability to move among states, and many millions of Americans do move between states. And you can't build a Berlin Wall around your state borders. You know, you can't. You keep capital in. You know, you learned that the hard way after the tax increases of a few years ago, when something like $1 billion of wealth left just Montgomery County alone after the millionaires tax went through. Now, I know the liberals, some of them said, well, that's just because of the economic downturn, there were fewer millionaires and that type of thing. But there was an analysis that we wrote about that year in Rich States, Poor States from Bank of America that showed $1 billion left because of people moving to other states from Montgomery County alone.
And they're all liberals.
And they probably were mostly liberals, so you're exploiting some of your problem, unfortunately. But you've learned this lesson. You've learned it here in Maryland. And as we move through the next slide, I'm going to skip that one real quick, and we'll go to the next slide. So one of the things that my co-author Arthur Laffer developed years ago, and this is legend because it supposedly happened on a cocktail napkin, probably during a very intellectual session at the bar, I would imagine, with Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld. And this was in the 1970s or 60s when it happened, long, long time ago. And basically, this has been ridiculed over the years by liberals. They think, oh, this has been debunked. It's voodoo economics, you know, and they talk about how it doesn't work. So let's just examine it. At the Laffer curve basics level here, at a 0% tax rate, how much revenue do you raise?
Zero.
That's the easy half of the equation. Now the part that trips liberals up is the other half, and that is, how much do you raise when you have a 100% marginal tax rate?
Zero.
Zero, right? Because people are not created to work for the privilege of just paying taxes. It just doesn't happen. It's not human nature. And I'll give you $100 if you find anybody out there that's going to work at a 100% tax rate and just go out and wake up at 6 a.m. and go work 60-hour weeks and give it all to the government. People just don't behave that way. That's called communism. You know, people don't work that way. It sounds okay in theory, and the problem is so many of our official statistics that we keep at the state level and the national level, when they do a score of a tax bill, and they say, well, this tax cut's going to cost this many $1 trillion, or this tax increase is going to raise this many $1 trillion, they ignore this basic principle. This principle is that people change their behavior based on taxes, and that's economics 101. Like we said, when you raise the price of something, you get less of it. When you lower the price, you get more. Taxes are a pretty direct price. This, all it does is show that people change their behavior based on taxes. Now, people get a little confused in some of the details sometimes as of how much people change their behavior, but the bottom line is that it's really non-disputable. People do change their behavior. We'll move on to the next slide. So one of the things out there today, some of the liberal groups have been trying to peddle this nonsense. It's really hogwash, if you ask me, is that weather matters more than taxes for growth. They say, well, Texas and all these states are doing so great, but the only reason they are is because it's so warm and people from the Midwest and the Northeast, all high tax places, just want to get out because of the winters. Now, it's kind of interesting. I almost was like, I thought hoping it was a joke when they first came out with this study. The headline is, weather matters more than taxes. I really think that some of these people don't have their tray tables in an upright and locked position. They just don't get it. They want to come up with all these excuses to say why taxes don't matter. But we all know that they do, because if anybody's been a small business owner, you know pretty directly how much that affects your hiring and all the decisions that you make. Now, I've often wondered, where is this magic dial where legislators could go into their back dark rooms and turn this dial to make sunny beaches out of farm fields and make great sunny winters? It doesn't exist. Legislators can't change it. That's just the fact of the matter. You got to live with what you're given. You got to play with the deck that you're dealt. So let's look at some of the other things here in the next slide, though, in terms of some of the states that I've been to in the last year. Some of the best weather in the country, in my opinion, San Diego and Maui. Now, their average temperature in Maui, 84 degrees. San Diego is pretty frigid there at 71 year-round temperature. But one thing about these places that they have in common, other than the awesome weather, is the fact that for some reason Americans are leaving these places. Now that's a pretty interesting question to ask your liberal friends next time you're at the water cooler and they start talking about how taxes don't matter. The best weather in the world, in Hawaii probably, arguably, some of the best, but 8 out of the last 10 years, more Americans have left Hawaii than have gone there. Wonder why?
Global warming.
Global warming, they're afraid they're going to drown or something, I don't know. But Hawaii has the highest income tax in the country today, 11% state income tax. Now I know there are some politicians here in Maryland who aspire to take that title from them. But for this time, Hawaii is still the highest tax state. California, over the last 10 years, 1.5 million Americans have moved out on net from California over the last 10 years alone. That's incredible. So whenever you hear weather matters more than taxes, you know it's a load of talk about. Just that businesses don't pay taxes, people do. This is something that the Wall Street Journal has written about extensively. My co-author Steve Moore may or may not have something to do with that. But the fact of the matter is, when you tax a business, an individual is going to pay the burden of that tax at some point or another. Now, once in a while when I give this presentation, I get a small business owner and they kind of scratch their head. It's like, what do you mean businesses don't pay taxes? Of course I do. Yes, they do. Businesses pay taxes. They write the checks and they pay on a quarterly basis to the IRS. But the bigger question from an economics standard is, who pays the burden of that tax? And as I show on this slide, it's either workers, it's customers, or it's shareholders. And it's one of those three groups. As academics, even more center-left economists out there will say that yes, individuals pay business taxes, we just don't know what degree. The most recent research out there suggests that workers pay the majority of business taxes. So when you tax a business, generally your workers are going to be paid less, the wages have stagnant wages, fewer job creation, that type of thing. That's why it's awfully important to be talking about business taxes in that regard, because the other side loves to play class warfare. We need to stick it to big business, this whole Occupy thing out there. That's why they're around. They just want to stick it to big business. They don't realize, or they don't want to realize, that when you stick it to big business, it's going to be the workers that pay. Now, as I mentioned, we rank the 50 states based on their economic outlook. That's our forecast to how well we think they're going to do in the future. As you notice, conspicuously absent from this top 10 list is our great state of Maryland here, unfortunately. The state of Utah has been, believe it or not, #1 ranked all 5 editions of Rich States, Poor States. In fact, I was with the senator from Utah yesterday in the U.S. Senate, Mike Lee, and I said, I'm getting kind of tired of giving Utah the #1 ranking every year. It's 5 years in a row. Can't you give somebody else a chance? But the Utah model is pretty successful. In fact, they were the first state to exit this economic downturn when we started to see some limited growth after 2008 crash. South Dakota, #2. They have no income tax. Virginia, your neighbors, as we talk about the battle of the Beltway, between Maryland and Virginia and D.C. Unfortunately, today it's not much of a battle. Most of the victories seem to be going south of Potomac, unfortunately. As you remember, we had this discussion about where Northrop Grumman was going to build its headquarters a few years ago. And basically the Virginia case was there's lower taxes, more predictable, better regulation, lower labor costs probably, better workers' comp treatment. And I remember Maryland comeback was, we've got other things that matter. We've got a better quality of life for, however they qualified that. It just doesn't work though. And, companies are moving in droves to places like Virginia. Now, for instance, South Carolina, I don't know if you followed the National Labor Relations Board suit where the Boeing company was looking to move. They wanted to move from Washington State to South Carolina and create a bunch of jobs because it was lower cost of business in South Carolina. And then the National Labor Relations Board stepped in and was like, oh, no, you're discriminating against workers. I almost thought I woke up in Soviet Union circa 1986 or something like that, with the federal government coming in and telling businesses where they can and can't locate. But the fact of the matter is, businesses do go pretty frequently from high-tax states to low-tax states. ALEC has run the tax and fiscal section. We continue to produce the Rich States, Poor States report. The next slide has my contact information as well. We really want you and other audiences. We go across the country and put on probably 60 or 70 of these type of events throughout the year based on Rich States, Poor States, and some of our other research. We really want you to be able to use us as a resource. We're not only there, primarily we're there for legislators, but conservative-minded people all across the country who believe in these principles of lower taxes, limited government, federalism, we really want to keep in touch with you. We want you to be able to use our resources. Many of those are available on our website. We encourage you, if you're on Facebook, like Rich States, Poor States, you can get the updates that we put out almost every day on a new topic on Rich States, Poor States type competitiveness issues. And also, if you're on Twitter, you can follow us at ALEC_tax. The book is available if you'd like an electronic copy of it. It's available. I'm happy to stick around and sign a few of those tonight. But as you go out there, you'll probably hear more of these attacks against ALEC, and they say we're this evil conservative organization out there. I kind of wear that as a badge of honor most of the time, because the people who are attacking us are people like Van Jones out there. You all know Van Jones. I mean, he got kicked out of the Obama administration because Obama couldn't even tolerate him because he was so liberal. He was an avowed communist. He basically signed the petition who thought the U.S. blew up the World Trade Center on 9/11. So I guess with enemies like those, I think hopefully all of you would be interested in getting involved with our organization. It doesn't cost you a dime. All we'd like is, please keep in touch, and we hope that you can use us as a resource. But I think that what we find in our research is pretty common sense economics, is that taxes matter, they matter a whole lot. And Ronald Reagan's saying that when it moves, tax it, when it keeps moving, regulate it, and when it stops moving, subsidize it. That liberal view of the economy is taking a toll on a good deal of states out there, and it's our view to hopefully inform enough of those like Maryland to start to rehabilitate themselves and turn themselves around into a private sector job creation engine once again. So thank you very much for your time and attention this evening. It's been great.